Namaste and Vanakkam, friends. Today we are going to deep dive straight into a historical firestorm that recently erupted on social media. It all started with Ministry of Culture Government of India making a tweet on the famous so-called Pasupati seal. It invited a counter tweet by historian Dr. Audrey Trishke. She tweeted that it was not Siva and that it was more likely an adapted form of proto-Elamite iconography, showing an Eurasian deity, lord of animals. Now, on the surface, that sounds like standard sober academic skepticism. We don't have the Indus script deciphered yet, so she warns against projecting a later medieval Puranic Siva imagery onto a 4,000-year-old artifact. But there is a far more calculated ideological gatekeeping happening here. By reducing this deeply local icon to a mere proto-Elamite adaptation, it feels like an obsessive compulsion to deny any indigenous deep historical or civilizational continuity to India. It is a purely diffusionist view, insisting that nothing sacred in India is truly homegrown. Diffusion does play a significant role in the process of how deities evolve throughout the world. But it is not the only part. There is also inherent cultural and spiritual continuity. So let us look past the social media noise and the motives of the accuser and even the accuser herself. Let us look past these things. Let us look at the actual accusation and then we shall subject it to a rigorous interdisciplinary analysis. When it was first unearthed, it was Sir John Marshall who famously dubbed it the Pasupati or proto-Siva seal. I strongly doubt that it could have been one of his Indian colleagues who are less celebrated than Sir John Marshall, who should have suggested this name, who should have actually came up with this name. And Marshall had four distinct reasons. He had given four distinct reasons for this. First, the figure appears to have three faces. The later Siva is often portrayed with 3 or 5 faces. We will all remember that Siva Mahadeva with the 3 faces with Trimurti in Elephanta cave. Second, the head is crowned with horns in the shape of a Trishul or trident, a classic emblem of Siva, and that is the reading of Sir John Marshall. Third, the figure is seated in a distinct yogic posture, and Siva is of course hailed as the Mahayogi in Indian tradition. And fourth, he is surrounded by wild animals, matching Siva's title as Pasupati, the Lord of Animals. But it has not been a smooth consensus since then. Decades of scholarly debates followed. In 1964, Herbert Sullivan, a scholar of religion, argued that the figure was actually a goddess, a mistress of bees. His famous paper was titled, if I remember right, a rereading of the Indus Valley religion. Renowned art historian Doris Srinivasan argued that in 1975 her paper was published, and in that she argued that it was a divine bull man representing perhaps fertility. His headdress was representing fertility. Professor of religion Alf Hiltebeitel suggested buffalo divinity, a Mahisha. So Asko Parpola, he linked it to a seated bull from Elamite seals. Archaeologists like M.K. Davalikar and Subhangana Atre, they thought that it was a virgin of bees. So yes, many scholars disagree with Sir John Marshall's reading. They think that his reading might have been too simple. However, a very eminent historian of ancient India with impeccable secular credentials, Upinder Singh, in her book, weighs the arguments from both the sides, and she comes to a conclusion that despite all these alternative readings, Marshall's basics are still incredibly persuasive. The figure is a male in a demanding yogic posture. Of course, he looks like a deity, and the similarities to the attributes of later day Siva remain absolutely striking, even if we don't know by what name the Harappans actually called him. Now let us look at the seal itself. It's a tiny steatite object, just about 3.53 into 3.56 centimeters, almost a square, with 0.75 centimeters thickness. But packed into this tiny space is a distinctly Indic layout. The figure is seated in what looks like a variant of Mula Bandhasana, knees outward, heels pressed together. You look at the wildlife surrounding him. They form a kind of a mandala. It is not generic Eurasian animals. It is very precise quartet of Indian megafauna. An elephant, a tiger on one side, an Indian rhinoceros and a water buffalo on the other side. Crucially, right beneath his throne there are two deer or stags rendered in profile, like looking backward, so their horns neatly in a symmetrical way meet at the center. Now, this is where the pure diffusionist argument completely falls apart. Yes, the master of animal motive exists across ancient Eurasia, but those usually feature lions or Western Asian beasts rendered in Mesopotamian styles. They completely lack this localized Indian fauna, they lack the yogic posture, and they definitely lack the paired backward looking deer beneath the the seat of this yogic figurine. To call this a mere foreign import is frankly civilizational gaslighting. It strips the Harappans of their own symbolic agency and genius. Now, let us bring in some fascinating science, a kind of a quantitative phylogenetic study of mythology. Just like biologists trace genes, mythologists can trace mythemes, the smallest indivisible building blocks of a mythology, a mythic story. By coding these mythemes across cultures, researchers can build actually family trees showing how the myths mutate and travel over thousands of years. And what does this data show actually? They show that these mythemes, they join together to form mythologies and they change slowly like hands of a clock. Researcher Julian Dehay did a phylogenetic study in 2013 tracking a Paleolithic myth centered on the Big Dipper, Ursus Major constellation. It's about a cosmic hunter pursuing a living horned herbivore that transforms into the stars while it was being chased and hunted. These core elements or mythemes show strong vertical transmissions across northern Eurasia, the Americas, and some African groups. Like branching out from a particular node, they spread across, and their roots likely go back to Paleolithic period. Unfortunately, the study suffers from all the studies that are made by European scholars, Eurocentrism. It does not include the very same elements that are very beautifully present and preserved in Indic literature. But they provide us a robust framework. And where do the literary attestations of these core elements show up in India? In Vedic literature, in Vedic texts. Rudra inherits this exact role as the supreme cosmic hunter who subdues the celestial stag, the Brahma Mriga myth. Rudra's arrow becomes Orion's belt and his hunting dog becomes Sirius, the star Mrigavyada. Even Asko Parpola, who argues for a Proto-Dravidian Harappan context, points out that this cosmic myth was likely known to the Harappans. Now, look back at the Pasupati Sea, those two backward gazing stags. It is called Parivriddha Mriga. Sit right under the seat of the figure, forming a kind of a cosmological foundation, so as to say. This is a stunning artistic spiritual evolution. In the primal Stone Age myth, the stag was the object of the hunt. The hunter chased the deer and the deer was looking back. And then that Parivriddha Mriga, from being chased and hunter, gets harmonized into the mandala of animals surrounding the yogic figurine. Here you see the very primeval transformation that would later become a civilizational, a core civilizational process called Samanvaya. Again, through millennia of evolution of Indian sacred art, that wild stag is domesticated and cradled securely in Siva's loving hands through the Harini Mudra. In Siva's Vikshadana form, he feeds the backward-looking deer, symbolizing the Lord's grace sustaining the individual soul or jiva. If you look carefully in sculptures, many of the sculptures, you can see that the Lord was holding his hands, the thumb and the finger together, and the three fingers would be alone. And those three fingers, they symbolize the three inner impurities. The same deer rests peacefully beneath the seat of a silent wisdom imparting Siva in Jnana Dakshinamurti tradition. The divine hunter has not killed the animal, he has harmonized the restless, ever-running human mind. Its animalistic instincts moving away from the divine and its higher cognitive self turning towards the divine. Finally, to be held by the divine in its own hands and nourished by the divine. But what about the horns? The classical Siva does not have horns, but the Harappan figure clearly does. Well, we have to look at the type of horns. Look at the shamanic figures in European cave art or the Celtic Cernos that you find in Gundestrup cauldron. They wear the stag antlers. But the Harappan seal features the deeply curved horns of a water buffalo, called the Magisha. But look at another famous Mohenjo-daro artifact, the yogic deity seal, designated as M305. On that seal, the figure wears these same curved horns, but star-like motifs are nestled inside the curves of the horns. The headdress is explicitly merged with the celestial symbols. Plus, the figure has long braided hair. So, the curved celestial horns framing a star on the Harappan deity's head are highly likely the visual precursors to the iconic crescent moon nestled in the matted hair of classical Siva. The horn indeed becomes a crescent. You can see echoes of this at India's southernmost tip, Indian mainland's southernmost tip, at Thanumalayan temple in Susindram, Kanyakumari district. Thanumalayan means Thanu is Siva, Thanu, Mal is Thirumal, Vishnu, Ayan is Brahma. The central icon is a lingam representing thus the Trimurti. And during the worship, the deity's anthropomorphic mask features a strikingly tall headdress, where multiple crescents mimic stylized curved horn. But as scholars shall warn us, we must maintain caution regarding an almost 3,500 plus years chronological gap. Motifs can be reinterpreted. They may change in their form, like a curved horn becoming a crescent moon. But this is exactly how iconographic evolution works. The ancient core form is retained, the outer elements change while the inner meaning deepens. Similarly, in a valid critique of John Marshall's identification of a trident pattern, a Trishul pattern in the headdress, Doris Srinivasan points out that the pronounced fan-shaped contour of the branches on the seal might have been influenced by the shape of the headdress, frequently worn by Mohenjo-daro terracotta female figurines. True. While in Mesopotamian context, she says, this type of headdress was emblematic of divinity, it might have had a broader meaning in the context of Harappan civilization, which has connotations of fertility and abundance. We saw that before also, right? That fertility and abundance was symbolized by the horns and the spreading branches. What proves especially compelling about this is the striking visual resonance of the same fan-like pattern nearly 3,000 years later in the crane feather headdress of Chola bronze Nataraja icons. The foremost art historian C. Sivaramamurthy considers them as peacock feathers derived from Siva's Kradamurti, the hunter tribal form, while most descriptions specify crane feathers. The motif may indeed derive from tribal headdress with the connotations of fertility and abundance. The very meaning that Doris Srinivasan discerns for the intersex samples. In fact, these crane feathers, this fan-like structure in the headdress is so important in Siva Nataraja form that when Tamil Nadu police asked the late archaeologist Dr. Nagaswamy to study the features of the Siva idol in an Australian museum as to ascertain whether it was a stolen idol from a particular South Indian shrine, he compared the three photographs that was taken from India and then he compared them with the statue that is present in Australia and concluded that all the three images in the photograph and the idol that has been kept in the Australian Museum, they all show absolutely the same details, and one of the key features of identification was the 8 crane feathers in the headdress of Nataraja. Now, digital historians like Ruchika Sharma, who sided with the Trashke, claim that the Vedic Rudra was only a destructive force, a Pasugna, or a destroyer of animals, and definitely not a yogi. Now, we have seen already that the headdress has iconographic continuity, that the probable themes that are coded inside the seal, they have their own indic transformation. Now we are coming to the third crucial part, that is Rudra was different from Shiva. The Puranic Shiva is completely different from Rudra, who was very destructive. But this completely misreads the Vedic data itself. That deities and godheads evolve is of course a universal phenomenon in religious history. One sees it in Yahweh, from tribal storm god to ethical universal godhead, or in Buddha's transformation from probable historical Shramana to a cosmic Dharmakaya. But Rudra's seemingly contrasting but complementary dual nature, both terrifying and benign, is right there in Rigveda itself. So in Rigveda, the second mandala, 33rd sukta, 4th verse, explicitly calls Rudra the best physician of physicians. Bishattamam tva bishajam shranomi. We hear that you are the best of the physicians, physician of physicians. Now, in South India, you have a Siva temple that is called Vaidyanatha temple or Vaidiswara temple. He is worshipped as the Lord of the physicians, the physician of physicians. See the civilizational continuity. In Rigveda 746.3, we ask for 1,000 well-breathed medicines that he has, while we ask him to turn away his weapons. Now, both these contradicting features have been brought together, harmonized in a poetic verse. It is not an accident that one of the most popular Rigvedic verse, the 7th mandala, 59th sukta, 12th verse, is quite popular among Hindus today as a very common prayer, Mahamrityunjaya mantra, which is today addressed to Siva, and of course it was addressed to Rudra. There is no difference. Archaeologist Jack Finnegan prefigures actually Upanishadic concepts in this verse. So he says that it is not just something to ask for preventing death, physical death, no. May be detached from death like a goat from its stem, meaning, but not from the immortal essence. So in this verse, the term Trayampaka as an epithet for Rudra, in its most straightforward interpretation, would mean the three-eyed one. However, there is a rich etymological and symbolic depth which can include the triadic cosmic structure. However, it really maps to the later iconographic development of three-eyed Siva. And what about the physical description? Way back in 1911, over a decade before Indus Valley civilization was even discovered, Saiva Siddhanta scholar J.M. Nallaswamy Pillai of Madras noted the following: the Gatapatim, the Methapatim, those are aspects of Rudra, and he was also considered as the king of sacrifices, and Methapati is the same word as the more popular word Pasupati. Pasu meaning the animal offered in sacrifice, Yajna Pasu, and symbolically representing the bound soul, that is Jiva. Furthermore, Rigveda 1st mandala 1141 describes Siva, Rudra, as having braided hair, Kapartine, Ima Rudraya Tavase Kapartine. On the Harappan seal M305 that we have seen, the yogic deity has that exact same prominent flowing braided hair. And millennia later, Chola bronzes depict Siva as Vrishabhadeva, the lord of the bull, with his matted hair. And in Rigveda, the Mandala 1, 114 Sutta, the first verse, it talks about the Rudra protecting both the humans and the animals. Dvipate, Chaturpate, both the two-legged humans and the four-legged animals. And here, millennia later, in Chola bronze, you see the Lord as the Lord of the Bull. And he has exactly the braided hair styled. Then you have the Kesi Sukta. In Kesi Sukta of Rigveda, Rudra is shown as drinking a cup of poison along with the Kesim, the Muni. So, that is the undeniable seed of the Puranic Nilakanta, the Siva who drinks poison to save the existence, the universe. So, the evidence completely dismantles this artificial wall between a destructive Vedic Rudra and a later yogic Puranic Siva. There is a continuity. There is a very beautiful, consistent civilizational continuity. A deepening, spiritualizing continuity. The seeds of that silent teacher, the supreme healer, the protector of all creatures were all already inherent, involuted in that creative mystic dynamics in the oldest layers of Indian literature. When one synthesizes all of this, the archaeological specifics, the quantitative myth mapping, the iconographic evolution, and the Vedic literature, you do not see a history of disconnected foreign ruptures. You see a multi-millennial civilizational coherence. So, why this aggressive denial? Dr. Ardrey's method is what we call a Motte and Bailey maneuver. When challenged academically, she will retreat to the safe motte of, well, we can't read the script, so we don't know for sure. But in public discourse, she occupies the activist Bailey, aggressively using the lack of decipherment to claim that any link to historic Hinduism is unscientific and invalid and perhaps even intentional with bad motivation. This is the 21st century update of the old colonial missionary framework, treating Indian culture as an empty vessel waiting to be filled by foreign imports, rather than recognizing its organic indigenous evolution. But the data tells a deeper story. India's history is a profound process of interiorization, where ancient primal motives were locally cultivated into sophisticated spiritual metaphors for yogic inquiry and self-realization. The noisy, politically motivated denials will continue online, but that silent yogic figure of more than 4,000-year-old Pasupati seal sits in perfect composure, ultimately speaking for itself. So, thank you so much. We will meet again in another podcast.
Buddham Saranam Gacchami.